So my name's Patrick. Oh, you can see all my placeholder text. So my name's Patrick. I asked Amy if I could do a talk today about my experience in running a startup, getting funding, and basically navigating life with no income for 2 years. I thought it'd be kind of interesting because this is really a hobby that started for me, like a hobby project that then got turned into like something that was earning money. And people were giving me money, like big money, and then I was sort of like a startup founder. That sounds kind of cool.
And then you were wasting money.
Yeah, and I wasted a lot of money, and I learned a lot of really financially expensive lessons along the way. I mean, really financially expensive. So I thought if anyone here is like interested in starting their own startup or has their own project that could get bigger, or if anyone's running their own business right now, anybody? Chance for a free plug?
Not yet.
Okay. Come on, guys, capitalist country, start a business. Then maybe you can learn something that I learned without having to waste your money yourself. So my business, oh, and follow me on Twitter, please. I'm called Patsnacks. I rarely tweet, but I promise it's really, really good. I'm desperate for followers. So my business is called 23 Shout. What is that? It sounds kind of cool. It is. It's basically a team phone that runs in your browser. What the hell does that mean? So let me give you an example of a local company that uses it, Explorer. So Explorer, when they started off, they do shipping and logistics, right? So they're selling $200,000 packages to people. Basically, that's their first sale they ever had was around 200 grand, right? And when you spend 200K with them to ship something across the world, you get an account manager, so you can call up and rightly say, where the hell is my cargo right now? Before they used 23 Shout, they had a table with 10 to 13 people sitting around it and one mobile phone in the center. And I think you all know this is going. The mobile phone, if you called their 1300 number, it would ring that mobile phone. Someone would then pick it up and say, who do you want to talk to? Right? So they can only have one person calling in at a time. It's pretty low tech. They weren't able to like leave messages. And then once COVID hit, they were really in trouble, right? Because they weren't allowed to have people in the office for quite some time. Staff didn't want to come into the office, so how the hell are they going to they're going to have to like Uber them the phone or something like that to get it there. They can talk to their account manager. So when they were using 23 Shout, they had one number, they called into it. 23 Shout would do some smart stuff, look up who's actually managing that account, and then route it to the correct person. Yada yada yada. Some really cool stuff. You could press 1 to request a call back. You could leave a message with your account manager. They'd get notifications on their phone. Huge step up from what they were doing before, right? So our target audience was small businesses that were just looking for a modern phone solution instead of all these garbage ones that you can get at the time, or something that's ridiculously expensive. We were actually quite cheap. So I'm going to cut long story short here. If you're wondering how 23 Shout ended, it failed. That's okay. 90% of all startups, and this is a true statistic, 90% of startups fail. That's the fact of it, right? And they'll fail in their first year. And then that trend will actually repeat for each year after it. So the year after that, 90% will, for those that actually got through the first year, fail. And then the third year, 90% of those will fail, right? So there's a reason that they call the companies that started startups and turn out to be like large, profitable corporations unicorns, right? Atlassian was a unicorn because they're not dead. Basically, if you don't die for long enough and you make enough money, you're a unicorn. That's how you earn that title. So yeah, this talk is really going to be, instead of me just telling a story, I want it to be some of the key takeaways that I learned from doing this over 3 years. I've narrowed it down to just 7. They're the first 7 that came to my mind, so they're probably the most important. But if you have any questions or anything that you want to add, obviously I'm not that great of an entrepreneur if I fail, right? So please just yell out as I'm going along, add your feedback, add what you want to say. No time like when you're doing it to actually say it. And yeah, if you can make my speech better, then please say something. Cool. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was, where did the idea come from? And there's this kind of this misunderstanding I had when I was younger, that if you want to start a startup, what you do is you get your friend Kelvin and you sit around a table and you like brainstorm some ideas. And we did this a couple of times. And then the best idea is your new startup, right? And you go off and work on that startup.
As best judged by us.
Yeah, exactly. That is like the quickest way to earn yourself a ticket into that 90% bucket of people who fail, right? Why? Because it's something that people want according to you. It has no validation whatsoever other than your own experience. So what am I talking about, like validated ideas and how do you get them, right? A real startup idea is something, it doesn't have to be this way. It's usually something that you encounter during your job as a pain point. So you're working day to day and you're like, man, this thing sucks that we do every day. It's wasting us so much time and effort. Imagine if it worked like this. And then you can actually go and, tell people, hey, would you pay for this? And if they answer yes, that's a validated idea. But to give you like an example of that, I've got two local examples of that. One is, I believe his name is Chris Raithke. I'm pretty sure he started a company called Notive. It's one of those, yeah, I know, that's great, intro, Google it. But he ended up selling it for $8 million. He's a local guy, and he was the first company to make one of those AIs that you invite to a Zoom call, and it'll take notes for you. You might have heard of these with some mixed success. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But essentially what happens is, you're having a Zoom call, you invite the bot, and then at the end, it'll generate this nice little neat summary, which will be, here are the action items for Kelvin for next week. Here are the action items for Patrick that you guys talked about. Here are the key points and things you need to bring up next time, right? Pretty cool. So he has this idea, first guy to have the idea. And so how does he get validation for this pain point? He went onto Twitter and he put out a tweet that said, hey, I've got this new AI. If you guys want to try it, just invite this email address to your Zoom calls. And so people started inviting the email address because they're willing to give it a try. And what they didn't know is that it was him sitting there with his headphones on in a meeting booth with his camera and microphone off, taking down all the notes for the meeting, writing down everything you said, and then afterwards he would send you a Word doc, right? So that's getting really quick, easy validation with a prototype, which is him, without investing too much time and effort into building this huge, massive platform that nobody might want at the end of the day anyway. And actually based off that, it got so popular that he was inundated with emails of people inviting him to Zoom calls. And he said, sorry, the bot's offline. And the first thing he did was go to a VC and then show them that what had happened, right? He said, look, I faked this thing. And I got like 4,000 emails in the first week alone. And they just gave him money on the spot, right? He actually went on to develop a real AI that could do that over the course of a year. And in that time, other people had caught on to what he was doing. And he quickly had a lot of competitors, like real competitors with real money in that space. And when he talked to him about it, he did end up selling the company for like 8 mil. But he said his biggest regret is then not going out to hire an army of remote workers, basically fake being the AI for him. He reckons if he did that, he could have sold it for an extra 10 or 20 mil, right? And that's startup life, which is sort of going to be the trend for tonight. You're going to notice like a lot of hacky stuff that happens, which is what qualifies as startup life. Where did my idea happen? So I was working at a company called service.com.au. It was a telesales company on the Gold Coast, working in Surfers Paradise. So it's a pretty classy place, as you might imagine. And they were cold calling people, and they started off with like, yes, I wasn't a salesperson. I was the CTO. They were cold calling people from like a CSV. So they had like mobile phones. They'd choose someone at random and then call them. And then they had desk phones. And then they got some crappy voice system. And the whole time I was just like, man, these things really suck, right? Is this like really the best we can do? So I went to my boss and I just said, look, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks. If I build something that's like at least as good as this, as this, will you pay me monthly for it? And he's like, yeah, whatever. So I went away on vacation, had a lot of fun, and I wrote up the system. And I came back and I was like, here it is. We don't save us. We don't need CSVs anymore. Agents, they can all log on, right? It's all great. And so the very next week, so 3 weeks after coming up with the idea, we had 21 seats plus 3 admins, so $2,400 a month in MRR from our first client alone. And that was pretty cool. That's like really quick and easy validation, right? I didn't build this massive platform. That thing was like stingy as hell. It barely worked. But people are still willing to pay for it because it was so much better than what they were doing at that moment. And I guess that's my first takeaway, guys, which is that good startup ideas come from real pain points that you can validate by selling someone a prototype. If it's something that you just thought up, or if like, your dad said he'd buy it and, your uncle said he'd buy it, but then they don't actually give you money, and that's actually a really shitty idea. And you'd be surprised at how often this happens as well. This happens a lot at places like Startup Weekends, which I'm not going to knock, but people go in there, it's like great idea and this great pitch, and then everyone goes off and actually tries to do it, and then nobody buys it, right? Because they didn't actually validate the idea. They didn't actually get money off somebody before they actually built the damn thing. So yeah, basically the next step for me was going full time. A few years had passed. I was working at a different company, and I basically realized at some point nothing had really happened. with 23 Shout at that point. I wasn't selling it to people because, you know, I was too young and stupid to realize what I had. That I should have been trying to do something. But at this point, I'm like, hang on, I'm making a few extra grand a month doing nothing. How many like chances do you get at this in life to actually get a profitable business that went through that 90% filter, got its first customer, got through another 90% filter? I should really quit my job. That was like really a bad idea. Just setting the bar for that. I was supporting my girlfriend through university at the time. She had no job. I was the only person paying the rent. I had just enough savings to get a house deposit, a home loan deposit. And I basically went to my HR person and said, look, I know I really love this job, but I quit. I want to go work full time on this thing that doesn't pay my rent. So I went full time on it. And you know what I did? I completely wasted the next 6 to 9 months just doing nothing but engineering. And this is like a big gotcha for engineers too. I should have been selling the product. I was like 95% of the time building the product and just making it cooler and building features for people who weren't actually buying it. And I wasn't actually focusing on just selling what I already had, which would have been a smart thing to do. So I very quickly found myself in need of more cash. And I just want to put this out here, like 95% of your day should be selling when you're running a startup, right? And then 5% of it should be engineering if you're solo. And that's just the way it is. How many companies do you know that have really crappy products that still somehow make millions of dollars? At the end of the day, sales is really what matters, and people will still buy crappy products if it's good enough, right? That's the big one, especially enterprises. They'll buy whatever the hell it is, no matter how crap it is, as long as it checks the requirement that they have at that time. The takeaway number 2, and this is pretty big, is that you cannot engineer your way to a profit. Stop sitting there and implementing features that no one's actually actively paying you for, and just start going on LinkedIn and messaging people and doing whatever dirty trick you can to try and sell somebody something.
Maybe not dirty tricks.
Yeah. Get their home address and go and pitch it to them. There is one exception to this. You can engineer your way to sales if you have something that's 10 times better than what is already out there. But this multiple, I'm talking like ChatGPT versus Google. This is not something that's easy to do. You have to have something that's revolutionarily better than what's already out there, because people won't switch products if you're just a tiny bit better, or if you have 2 or 3 extra features. They don't care. Unless they have like an actual problem with the product they're using right now, they're not going to switch it because it's already set up and they're paying for it, and why would they?
Especially for something that's so embedded in their organization, like a phone system.
Phone system is something that's really hard to get someone to switch, so pretty quickly learn. But if they're setting up a new team, it's much easier. So what do you do when you blow through your life savings? You have no more money for a home deposit. You've only got about 3 weeks worth of rent left, and you're totally screwed. And you're running a startup. Is anybody?
Get a job.
Yeah, well, that's what I should have done, right? That would have been a smart thing. But I went to a VC, man, and I took more money. VCs are actually really, really big teddy bears. Don't be afraid of them. If you go and pitch your thing to them, they will happily give you feedback on whatever that idea is, even if you're not there to actually take their money. They're more than happy just to, you know, appear as somebody in the industry who's a nice person, and they're out for you. They're out for the founders, you know, even though they're all bankers at the end of the day. But they're more than happy to give you feedback on your business and basically tell you what you should be doing, even if you're not part of their cohort. I spoke to 3 VCs. I spoke to 1013, who offered me the idea that if I come back at 20,000 MRR, that they'll give me some investment. I spoke to EVP by introduction from a friend, and their response is basically, we do $2 million investment minimum. Do you want $2 million? Are you pitching for that? And I was like, no. That's pretty crazy. Not really. And then I spoke to Scalata, which was also by invitation. Scalata was awesome. They basically heard me out, and at the end of the day, they were happy to offer me $200,000 in initial investment plus a membership into their 5-month accelerator program. So you're probably wondering why they did that, right? Because I just told you I did like 9 months of not really increasing my revenue. You know, obviously I wasn't very good at running a company if that was happening. That happened because there's really 2 or 3 big ways that you can actually get funding. You either need to have really good validation on your idea. So think Chris Reefy, we've noted. you need to show really good upwards momentum in your financials. So if you can prove that you have financials where you put $1 in and you get $5 out, then they're going to pour cash into you because you're like an unlimited money machine, right? Or you can be absolutely confident as hell when you go in there and basically sell them on a vision. That's the hardest one to do. If you've got nothing to show for it, that's your only option. But that is the hardest one to do. But I went in there. Obviously, I'm a pretty confident fellow, apparently, because I went in there with absolutely nothing, with a business that was kind of losing money. And I talked them into giving me a big check, which was pretty cool. They pretty quickly realized what was going on, by the way. But that was actually the wrong, oh, sorry, I should have been down here. That was actually the wrong thing to do. I should not have taken investment. Like you said, I should have gotten a job, right? Absolutely called it far ahead of time. You should not go for money, takeaway number 3, unless you know exactly what you're going to do down to the penny with every single bit of it. And there's a really good example of this later. But you will waste money if you don't actually know, have like an actual plan for it, right? You should go in there and say, look, I have this model where each person I put onto my sales team generates an additional $5,000 revenue. But I need to beat my competitor to the market. So that's why I need to hire a team of 20 people with this proven model to make it happen in time, right? That's an actual like proper request to a VC company instead of just going in there with a vision and a dream. But there's this thing that happens when you get money from a VC. It's like, it's like, you ever heard of like instant wealth syndrome? Man, this is like a different level. Suddenly you're cool if you got money from a VC, like you're one of the cool guys because you talked your way into getting funding. And there's this real like door opening effect that VCs have. They will put you in contact with a lot of really cool people who are actually willing to listen to you and buy your product if you want to speak to them. So we had a pretty good time then. We got more clients, we're getting more money just by introductions to the rest of the cohort, the VC cohort. They were happy to buy our product. That was really cool. Not enough to actually help us because we also took on additional staff. We took on a programmer and we took on 2 external contractors to help develop it. The plan was I would do sales and they would do programming. There is something wrong with that theory though, which I'll come back to later. But we also got our first big deal lead, right? So I was going to name drop them. It was Bright Energy, because I don't think it really matters anymore. It was a long time ago. But they just noticed us on LinkedIn, right? Totally random. And they said, look, we got this project. We're starting this new division of the company. And we have this one requirement that needs to be solved. We just need to record calls. Can you record calls? It's like, yeah, I can record your calls, man. We did the math on it. That first year alone with them would have generated us $12 million in revenue. $10 million of that would have been profit. That's pretty big, right? That had the VC. They were really happy. Everyone's totally excited. You're unicorning, man. This is it. You're going to buy a boat. We're going to buy 3 boats. It's going to be fantastic. So it's a really good time all around. Everyone was very excited. But can you guess what happened? I'll try and hide the next slide. I'll tell you what happened. Startup happened. Something happened at the last possible moment. We had 4 months that we had to invest into this client to get them the actual requirements they needed. So it turns out there was a lot more than what they initially described. And also we had to put a lot of legal effort into it as well, because negotiating a contract of that size, they have certain expectations from you to deliver to them around legal compliance, certain certificates that your company needs to have, and also like service agreements, etc., that need to be exchanged back and forth several times, and those lawyers are going to cost you thousands of dollars a day in order to actually get them to sign off on it, to give them the confidence that yes, your company can actually handle this and they're not wasting their time. So we all invested a lot of time into this project, and I think you can imagine why, right? Oh, sorry. You think you can imagine why, right? This could have been like the actual dream, the fire escape door that leads you up into the good life where, you're doing cocaine with Elon Musk and stuff like that. No, but I've done it. So we're all very excited. We invested at the time, so at the time when we got the money from Skalata, our company had around 13 months worth of runway. So we were also what's called default dead, which essentially means that if you do not gain additional investment by the end of this period of time, you will run out of money and fail anyway, right? which is totally fine. A lot of startups operate that way. In fact, it's incredibly normal for them to operate that way until they actually get bought out or acquired or whatever their end goal is for themselves. But that means we had this very hard 13-month timeline before we had to go and actually get additional investment, etc. You should actually be seeking additional investment almost immediately after you get your first round. It's way better for you and your negotiating position and also your sanity if you seek investment when you don't need the money, than rather when you actually are approaching this limit and you're desperate. Because VCs know you're desperate and they're going to give you a worse deal because of it. But if you can go around with all the positive news and we have all this money in the bank and things are going great and you actually raise more of that, that's a much better position for you. And in fact, an interesting part of this big deal lead that we had was that the cost of servicing them for the first month they were a customer was actually larger than the cash reserves we had, which means we would have gone bankrupt just trying to bring them on as a client before they actually paid us, right? And there was no getting around. There's no saying, can we have an advance, right? Because that looks really unprofessional and they would have just left us immediately. So that's a really good example of how to go back to a VC and say, I need this money for this project. I had to go back to Scalata and say, look, I need an additional $300,000 or we won't be able to get them through the first month and we won't make all this money. So if you actually have that allocation of what you're using it for, that's a really fantastic example of it. But the Ukrainian war happened, long story short. Essentially, I got this legal agreement completely agreed upon, exchanged back and forth. We went through their purchasing committee. That was pretty scary. And then I signed it. I sent it to them. I had a text message from my guy. Thanks for the signature. I'm going to get that countersigned for you within the hour by my head of the department. We've agreed to it. And then he called me at around 3 p.m. I'm like, where the fuck is that contract, man? This is I'm about to click purchase on the Ferrari. Where is he? And he calls me. He says, oh, so I've just lost my job. The entire department's been laid off and the investors are scared because of the Ukrainian war and the rising cost of lithium. They're basically getting rid of this entire project. So that's pretty devastating, right? We were planning on, we're doing interviews for required staff that we would need to service them for that first month. We spent a lot of money on both legal and developers, plus we'd allocated our own time during the day, like the whole day is getting this contract actually across the line and what they needed for it. And now it was all gone. And you can't even get angry at the guy because he's lost his job too, right? So you're just like, oh, I'm really sorry, man. That sucks, bro. And then you hang up the phone, you're like, you fucker. My fourth takeaway is that there is no such thing as a big deal. It's really just another lead. We devoted 100% of our time on this single lead and getting it across the line, whereas it should have just been another lead. Even though it would have taken a while, that's fine. There's no reason that we couldn't have kept doing other things, such as bringing on board other clients during that time span, or just doing better market research, or just trying to get more money out of our existing clients, or these other things. We should not have devoted so much time to them. Even if it had taken a little bit longer and we wouldn't have gotten past their deadline, they would have extended it for us. There's no reason for us to do what we did. That sucked, right? So we lost a lot of time out of our runway, including additional funds that we had to spend on the project itself. That wiped off even many more months. So now we're down to around 6 months.
You burned almost a quarter of your runway on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That really hurt, right? And the investors are pretty upset by it too. They don't blame you. They understand. They were getting whipped up by it too, right? They got carried away on the dreams of being, billionaires instead of millionaires. So it's all good all around. Basically, you just got to bring yourself back and just keep going and say, okay, that's a lesson I learned. The problem was the market was changing pretty rapidly during this time. From the point where I had first come up with the idea to my boss, there was really no one else doing what we did, which is like just a VoIP phone in your browser. If they were doing it, it was pretty crappy. The biggest competitor out there was Aircall, which you might have heard of. It's a pretty popular company. Their website was so dingy when they were like just starting out, and I was just starting out at the same time. At that point, they had gotten so big and have such a marketing momentum, you cannot escape their ads. They are everywhere. If you go into England and walk around London, they actually have phone booths in London where you can go in and make calls for free using their network. And it's just got their logos over everything, right? That's pretty cool. That's like letting you know that they've won. You cannot compete with that level, which is the other really harsh level, the harsh realization at that point, which is that you got to know when the time isn't right for a new competitor. if you don't, like I said, if you don't have anything that's like 10 times better than whatever's already out there, like ChatGPT to Google, people aren't going to give up on what they're doing. Like a great example of this is if you came to me and told me that you wanted to make a search engine competitor to Google, like only a year ago, I would have said you're completely insane. Like, what are you doing? People aren't going to stop using Google. Like maybe one or two people will, but not like I always say that it's kind of stupid. I always say that like, unless you got the girls at the beach, like wearing their sunglasses and just Instagramming using your product, you fail. Basically, that's like the bar you have to measure, right? They are ubiquitous out there. You can't get the mass adoption on that. And that's the other harsh realization, right? Which is that if you mentioned at the beginning, I didn't mention it. I was meant to mention it, Kelvin.
All right.
Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning that we're getting hijacked. All good. I mentioned at the beginning that I really enjoyed the best thing about giving that product to my boss was having a 2-week deadline and learning how phone networks work. It wasn't so much my passion for giving, people new contact center software. That wasn't really part of it. And you actually have to have a passion for whatever the hell it is you're doing. If you're just doing something as like a side project and you really don't care about it and you can't wait until you can just hire somebody else to do your job for you and then you don't like really want to do it anymore, you'll step back, you're probably going to fail, right? You really need to be on top of what's going on and really like what you're doing, no matter what it is.
Is it you in this stuff?
No. I've never put Teams on my laptop.
Understand.
What do they call that? Product founder fit. Founder fit.
Exactly. It's not so much like, look, maybe you have a part of a team and you can be like one of the early first developers who just gets a crap ton of equity for helping them out. But you're not a founder. You're not the founder of that company. You need to find someone who actually cares about what they're doing. So this came to the next part, right? We're quickly running out of money. I did go back to Scalata, ask them more, because at this point, I really call it like the startup sillies that founders get, where they're just trying anything they can to make it work and nothing is working. You will see founders like basically lose their minds at this point in time. And I see it a lot. You got to also know when it's over, right? You got to know when you should stop. You don't want to be one of these people who keep pushing a startup that never goes anywhere. And you've invested all of your money. You've got a spouse who's supporting you for years on something that's just not working out. You want to be one of those other founders who just said, you know what, yeah, I tried that for like a year or two, it didn't really work out, but I got lucky on my next one. And that was what made me rich after it got acquired, right? Very rarely do people actually succeed on their first try.
How do you know that point? Like, because you don't want to look like a quitter. You don't want to burn all your bridges for the investment money that you've taken. How do you? I imagine that's quite hard. Like, how do you know that? All right, we've got to put the nail in the coffin.
It's better than just like dragging it on and letting your investors think that you care. And actually, investors won't care if you shut it down and call it quits, right? When I told mine, it was like, yeah, cool, awesome. And I was actually speaking to one of their associates recently, and I said, Justine, you guys are never giving me money again, right? Like after what happened. And she was like, no, actually, you're more likely to get money next time it comes to us. I'm like, really? Like, you guys know that I like blew it all on like business flights and stuff like that, like 200K, and I just had a lot of fun with it. Not really. That's not true, in case they watch this. And she said, no, because now you're more de-risked, basically. And what happens when you actually go for money? Let's say you ask an investor for $2 million and you've really budgeted it. So you know exactly that you need $2 million for 10% equity or something like that. Let's say you get like a really good deal. They at the last point will usually just turn around and say, we're upping it to 3, by the way. And you can say, well, no, I don't want to give you 15%. That wasn't on the table. No, 10%, but you're getting 3 million now. Because they know you're going to fuck up and learn lessons that you can only learn by burning money and doing something stupid with it before you actually spend money wisely, right? That's a really big part of it. And the same thing with Scalata now is that they know that I screwed up with real money, your investors' money, and then more likely to give me cash next time because they know I've learned those lessons the hard way, right? I lost all my savings doing this initially, and then I lost the 200K they had learning some pretty tough lessons, right? And to answer the question, for me, the point I knew I had to shut it down was like on the weekend when I opened up a new project and I was working on a hobby instead of 23 Shout. And I was just like, oh, I really don't care about this anymore, do I? I should probably shut this thing down. Not from the lack of opportunities to make money. Like I still had people offering me money privately. But I just, like I said to them, like, look, I'm going to waste your money too because I really don't care anymore. Like I'm just sort of over it. So when you shut down a startup, you basically call your customers and say, look, it's pretty bad news. We're part of the 90%. You know, that sucks. And just give them a due date. And if you can, do the right thing by then, because they could actually be future customers or business partners or whatever in the future. For us, we went around to Aircall and tried to negotiate a mass discount for all of our clients, and we just pretended we had like way more than we actually did to get them a better offer, which is fine. Right, so just do the right thing by people. Don't like lie. It's never good to lie. And yeah, failure is not frowned upon. You might have like one jealous coworker who's like happy that you failed, but fuck them. Like they're like, who cares? They're not doing anything. In business, and especially in the US where it really matters, they do not care if you fail at all. The more failures you have, it's like the more marks up you have under your belt. As long as you didn't like fail at a stupid failure, fair enough, so you just lied to everybody, then you're fine in everyone's books. Just keep trying, basically. But that's my journey condensed down. There was a lot I forgot to talk about. But I'm also aware of a conscious of time. If anyone has any questions or like wants to hear more stories, I'm more than happy to give them. I don't stop talking usually, so just feel free to ask.
I was just wondering, with the shutting down time there, were there other like exit strategies you investigated? Like what about even starting open source with your?
Yeah, I thought about it. I was actually too embarrassed with my own code to go open source, which sounds kind of stupid. But that's like a real developer thing. But also,
don't be embarrassed, just own how bad it is.
Yeah, that's the one thing I can't own. But it was almost just like if I open source it, I'm still attached to it. So I didn't really want to be part of that. I also looked into selling it, and I did ask our VCs for some references, and they were more than happy to offer them. But at that point, I didn't even show up in the meeting. I was sort of just like, I don't really care anymore, to be frank with you. Like, they can't give me back anything that's actually worth time. So that was part of it. At the end of it, I was just like, screw it, who cares? But if you shut down gracefully, if you want to wind up a company, you need to have less than $1,000 worth of assets. So there was a little bit of like, I had to buy my own computer off the company sort of thing. And then the company had to like get rid of the money, get rid of all its assets, etc. But that's so much easier than liquidating, like doing it the hard way where you actually default and have no cash at all to pay your bills. That's really hard to wind up a company then, and it goes on your record. So it's much better to just shut it down gracefully, just buy your own laptop or sell it on eBay or something like that. Just get money in the bank and then just close the company and give yourself the money. It's like a party gift, right?
Especially if you put money in yourself at the beginning, right? Which means you can take money back out again.
Yeah, I didn't get much. I'm just going to put it out there, but at that point, it was a lot of money.
Effectively, you're loaning your company some money.
It's
paying about that loan, yeah.
Yep. And that was part of how our investment worked. It was equity investment, right? It wasn't. Anyway, but it will show up in your cap table, and they'll actually see their returns on a monthly basis. When you file your reports, they'll actually say like, oh, your investment is going up this way or down that way. So they have a really clear picture of what's going on.
When you do startups, do you register that as a limited liability thing, or?
Oh, sorry. My hearing is really bad, by the way.
It's like, do you register that as a limited liability, or like how does that work?
As in the initial investment?
No, the assets and the stuff that you put into the startup. Is it a limited liability setup?
No, you do. So let's say I'd like purchase a laptop with it. Is that what you mean?
No.
What's your company structure?
Yeah.
Oh, so I don't know. You can have a look at my initial paperwork if you'd like. I don't think it's confidential anymore. I frankly can't fucking remember. It's been a while.
It depends. I spoke to an accountant because I set up my own company structures recently for consulting. And there's a lot of options. Like, it depends on how abstract you want to go and how many layers of protection you want to have. And
I will say those layers of protection rarely actually add any protection. If you do something really bad and an ASIC wants you, they are coming for you. And they don't care that it was owned by a trust, that your uncle was the trustee. It doesn't matter. They'll come and get you.
Yeah, like normally just a single proprietary limited company is enough to get you started.
Yeah, but
and it's cheaper than owning trust setup as well.
Yeah, the thing is, if it's like a sole trader thing,
I
don't think the shutdown option is even on the table. For a sole trader, you can't shut down.
Investors won't accept that sort of level.
Yeah.
If you're trying to go for investment.
I don't think his business is like sole traders. It has to be something else.
Something else.
Yeah.
You'd really want, and like, not an accountant, so talk to an accountant, but I think you'd be crazy trying to start like after you're getting any kind of revenue and customers, you'd really want to have some sort of company structure in place, because otherwise your personal finances are getting too mixed up with your business finances.
Yeah,
At least if you're behind it, Patric Limited, right? Especially around accounts, it's its own entity. You have at least some level of legal protection.
And on
Your
top of
personal
that,
assets aren't on the line.
on top of that, part of the reason I frankly don't remember is that when we took investment, they forced us to completely change our company constitution. So we were a PTY Ltd company. We went into this like some law path constitution. There was then a constitution change plus several shareholders agreements plus founders agreements. Layers upon layers of paperwork which just bind you in all different ways. So like if, for example, one of the last things we have to do is that by the shareholders agreement and the preferential shares agreement that they got when they put in investment, they basically get first right to do anything. They can veto any decision you make, say preferential shares that no one else can get. Like even if you take additional investment, no one ever gets anything. It's like a protected class of shares with cells. But they were supposed to get whatever money was in the bank account, essentially. So that's to protect them. In case you did, they actually had this happen once where someone started a company, got the 200K, then immediately shut down the company and paid out the directors, which is him. And he got a free 200K. So they got every bit of money until they were paid back, and then you get to get your own from the end too. But as part of like ending it nicely, they were just like, yeah, they don't care, you just have the money. Like whatever's in there, you guys have it. Like you didn't try and screw us, so you can just keep it.
I think Ben's got his hand raised.
Oh, hello.
Ben, do you have a question?
I do. Hey, thanks very much for all your info. I was just wondering, would you do it again?
Do you want me to just do it on my laptop and turn my laptop on?
No,
Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I got two questions for you. I was just wondering. The first one, what sort of insurance did you have on your business? Considering you've got like collecting data from people, did you need to get like a specific type of insurance to have your startup, or just public indemnity?
Yep. Great question. We did not. We had the option to get director's insurance, which is probably something you should have. So if your company gets sued for that sort of thing, the insurance company will pay you out. And then there's also, we had to just get like basic employee work cover stuff, which really annoyed me. I'm like, I'm not going to sue myself. This doesn't make sense. Those are basically the only two things we went for. There were additional offers where people came out of the woodwork as soon as they found out we had money and tried to sell us different kinds of insurance, like startup insurance and data protection insurance, in case you get hacked. We didn't have any. Most of the startups in there didn't have any. It's like, you know, being a startup, you got to really verify this crap, because if you just do this stuff, this is terrible. This is not legal advice. If you just do this stuff, you're going to run out of all your investment before you can actually do whatever you want with it, right?
Yeah, right. Okay. So what if I was like storing all of my data on like Firebase or something? Would that be fine?
I'm not a lawyer, but I think as long as you are confident enough in your data protection policy, you should be good.
I think that's a really vague question, right? Because it depends on where you're servicing and what the local laws are. Like if you're servicing Europe, well, then you've got GDPR.
If you get hacked, then yeah, you're responsible as the director. Don't get hacked is my advice. Right? Like security was like the #1 priority while we were doing it, because we found out that people were storing credit card details in 23 shout, which you're not allowed to do, and we weren't allowed to have. So we basically just went through and triple checked every single thing that we wrote to make sure it couldn't be hacked out. Oh, and actually, interestingly, we did actually suffer a fraud incident that cost us $7,000 while I was on a plane flight. Interestingly, someone had signed up and realized that you could get a free number and then forward it to someone else without restrictions. So what they did is they got a free number and then they set it to forward up to a toll number they control. So stupid. I can't believe we didn't think of this. And then they just spammed calls from Aircall, I think, to our servers, which then forwarded the call to the toll number, which racked up like a ridiculous toll cost with Twilio. It cost us $7.5 grand by the end of it. Twilio suspended our account after like 5 minutes. Like, what the hell are you doing? Cloudflare blocked it as well, because they thought it was a DDoS attack. But that was pretty bad. That was really, we were small enough that we didn't have to like do anything with that, thankfully. But we did lose a lot of money because of that. Yeah, anyway, don't get hacked.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.
No problem. I'm not a lawyer.
No accounting advice.
Yeah.
I guess as a founder, to me, I think what happened is like a good experience. I guess you don't regret like the whole thing.
No.
So if you have another idea in the future, I guess you will still do it again.
Yeah, I'll validate my idea still, and then I'm just gonna not blow all my cash on the idea, I guess. I mean, I've learned so much from doing this, right? Really cool, like once in a lifetime stuff, sort of stuff.
One of the lessons we discussed when going over this was the fact that you did validate it early and you got some ideas early, but then you fell back into the engineering trap once you had early validation instead of validating and then continuing to validate and selling.
And this is one important thing for engineers to watch out for. And even the VCs were saying, like, we're really going to be watching you like a hawk because we normally don't invest in sole engineer founders because all you do is just engineer this fucking product, pardon my words, instead of actually selling the thing. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I did that. So that's part of it. Just sell, guys. Sell.
If you don't want to sell, then find like
a coach.
Don't take a bit. Yeah, find a co-founder that likes doing that side of things, or start a business that doesn't require as much manual sales and something that you can do more of an automated marketing funnel or something like that, where you get normal like sign-ups online as opposed to having to do the manual sales process.
Yeah, because I mentioned it before that I told the guy our strategy was you program and I sell. That was so stupid. I should have hired a salesman because I'm a programmer. I should have been programming. And I didn't like sales. I didn't like enterprise or small business sales. I would prefer enterprise. But it made no sense. I was basically giving myself a job that I knew I was going to be bad at the time. I did eventually end up hiring a sales guy towards the end. It was way too late. It was complete shit. And hiring people and then getting rid of them early on is still obscenely expensive. It cost me. Ironically, he cost me $23,000 to hire for only a week or two and then fire him. So at least he was on brand. Yeah.
Did it ever occur to you to build in public, like publishing what your new features are on Twitter? And yeah, I'm not sure how it works for B2B companies. And will it work if you publish it on Twitter?
In our space, I should have been going to conventions, but the conventions were cancelled because of COVID. Because most enterprise people buying these sorts of phone systems really don't browse Twitter. They browse LinkedIn, which is how we got a few people interested. But you know, you're like one voice out of a million screaming on LinkedIn, and your post gets like absorbed almost instantly. There's a lot of really great tools for selling on LinkedIn, but you're gonna basically it's cold calling people. LinkedIn messaging is cold calling people, and you're gonna have a hard time on it. I should have been going to conventions. I should have been making a convention and then going to. That's what I should have been doing.
With all your spare time, that's coming.
Yeah, with all my spare time.
Yeah.
From the moment your investment went through till how long was it that period of where you went, okay, we're just gonna
Wind it up.
throw in the chips?
I got investment. It came through. The money was in the account in October 2020, I believe, and I decided to completely get rid of it in October last year. So it's about 2 years.
Okay.
So at one point, it was like I had to go to my employees, and I was like, I know I convinced you to leave your other job, and I know we've been friends for a long time, but I'm really sorry. I'm firing myself, and I also have to let you go as well. Right? Pretty shitty thing to do.
You did the right thing, but I know you gave like a month notice to Clayton.
I gave a month notice to him, and then I helped him apply for jobs. And I remember him being in a meeting with me. I was like, "How's the job hunt going?" He's like, "This is really weird to talk to you about this. It's going pretty good."
You gave the Ukrainians a bit of notice as well, even though they were contracting agency.
Yeah, they were still pissed off though. But I don't blame them, right? It's pretty hard for them. After the invasion happened, right? They just wanted to make some cash, keep their minds focused on something. And I was basically saying, "Hey, I ran out of money. Sorry."
So what happens after you got the money from the investors? So do they tell you, or do you have to let them know how you spend the money? Like,
so what happens? Yeah, in our one, we had a representative there. They would like choose amongst themselves who's going to be your representative, and then the representative has like 2 associates. It's all very, like out of the TV show. And then initially every week we had to submit reports, but then they were just like, "This is too hard. Let's just do it monthly." So you basically send them a profit and loss statement for the month, for the last 3 months trending, which shows exactly what the line items you're spending on, and then they can like be like, "What the fuck, man? Why do you spend this much on legal fees?" And then you also send them a balance sheet, which basically an overall view of your business and how it's going, horribly right or horribly wrong. The accounting is actually, I got to say, it's actually really interesting because it's a lot like programming and engineering. You can do some really hacky stuff with accounting and just make money disappear, or just like make money appear out of nowhere. You can really do that sort of stuff. Like you need to, if you're lending money to someone, you need to like bury into exactly where they're spending money and what on. because you can get really creative with it and just completely lie to people.
That's got 30 laptops in his stuff.
Yeah, I bought a lot of laptops. I genuinely bought like 3 laptops. The sales guy wanted a laptop. I'm like, okay, he said you're good, you got good references, I'll buy you a fucking laptop. And it turned out to be shit, and I had to get rid of him after a week. So, if you want a laptop, I'm selling.
2 questions. Was getting an investor, like, so you did about 12 months into it, basically bootstrapping, and then you got investment. Was it like getting a boss, like going from being a boss to then just having a boss as soon as you had an investor with a stake?
Now, I was so scared of him at one point. I used to have a boss at ClickGen who I just like hated the guy. He like really singled me out and like picked on me for no reason. But I just remember like meeting him later after I had these investors, and I was just like, dude, you are fucking nothing. I got way bigger fish I got worried about. Yeah, they're pretty scary, but
Because more did they control your direction? Have more like
no.
So you didn't lose say of your company.
They weren't actually, like I said, like I eventually realized they weren't scary at all. They're not like a boss. They're like someone who like keeps you gently on track. Like, hey, you should probably be focusing on this, or you said you were going to do that and you haven't. What gives, man? What's your justification for going in this new direction? Did you do any market research? Sanity check. Do you actually have money to do that? And you're like, oh wait, you're right. I don't actually have money to do that. A really great piece of software you should use if you're starting startup for accounting. It's called Fathom. Fathom's really cool because
They're a
it lets
local
you.
company, right?
Huh?
They're a local Brisbane company.
Yeah, they're actually a local one too. They're doing really well. Xero is kind of worried about what they do, so they're trying to build what they do really rapidly, which is that it lets you project your costs into the future in a really easy way that looks like a spreadsheet. So you can say, like, I'm predicting that this thing is going to make me return month on month an additional 11% growth, right? And it will slowly show like that upwards trend and how it correlates with other things and where your money's coming or going from. And basically you have this, if you scroll right far enough and your money ever goes negative, you know you're in trouble, right? Which sounds silly, but it can actually really happen. You can run out of money before you actually make the returns, regardless of the fact the returns are going to be huge. Similar to what happened with our Fry contract that didn't work out.
Second one was, if you were doing it again, would you bootstrap or go investment?
I would find a co-founder.
Yeah.
If I was doing it again. My biggest regret is not getting a sales co-founder. And I tried really hard to get one, but salespeople are like pretty, you know, you got to watch them because they sell things for a living, right? And none of their offers made sense. I had one guy who was really shit hot sales guy, you know, Jacob. And his only offer was that he would come on board for 20% of the company.
Working part-time 3 days a week or something.
Yeah, and I was just like, this is like some stupid joke, right?
The problem was he was really good.
He is extremely good at it. And he thought he'd get away with it. I'm just like, how can I go to my investors and say, you put in 200K, but this guy is putting in like barely anything.
And he didn't want it on the vesting schedule either. He just wanted it. Like,
they actually would have vetoed that. They would have been a veto moment where they've been like, this is fucking stupid as hell. What are you doing? All that. But most of the time, investors are teddy bears. I used to send my memes on Instagram. I'm getting a reply. It's like, this is really inappropriate, Patrick. And then he'd send me another meme. That was great.
But so you go account co-founder, but again, do you think you would go down the investment route, go like Scalata or something like that, or would you try?
If I saw us doing well enough and I had an actual financial model that would have justified it, then yeah, I would have. But at this point, I wouldn't get into that business again because I just don't think there's a room for another player right now unless they're doing something completely different. Like the open source angle is already targeted by OpenPhone. That's their play into the market. Their whole thing is like open source and you pay them for enterprise support. There's a local one that's like really boutique and does nice stuff, but they can't actually make US calls. So I got a few of their clients. There's all sorts of plays into a market. Like what is your way to get into that market? And sometimes it just isn't a way. That's just the fact of it. There's no point competing. You're just going to waste your own time and money to do something else.
I have one more question. Scalata, are they, so VCs can typically fall into 2 camps. One is go big or go home, like we're not interested in a company that's just profitable, we want you to be a unicorn, or to go broke.
Mm-hmm.
So like our investors at Splash are like that. They don't want a company that makes just some money. They want $1 billion company, or they want you to go broke, John. Like that's it. Or there's others that are like, all right, we'll put in a small amount and we just want to see a profitable business with a potential exit over time. But it could be in the hundreds of millions, not billions. Do you know what camp Skype was?
Secretly, they probably all wanted the second one, but every single one of them will do the first one. The justification they give you is that if you shoot to you want to like get to the sky, then you've got to actually aim for the moon, right? You've got to aim way bigger than where you're actually trying to go in order to actually get somebody and somewhere even close to that. But yeah, they will basically tell you like, oh, what's that? Your goal is to have millions upon millions of dollars and never have to worry about money for you or your family again. That's not good enough. You need to go way bigger than that. You've got to like own Mars or something. That's got to be your goal. So they'll all hype you up to try and get way bigger than that. And at a certain point, you realize you're like, oh, hang on, you're setting me up for like suicide burn of the company, right? Where we will either land it, like, it's like one of SpaceX's rockets. We either land it or we explode. That's like the only two outcomes of the trajectory you're putting us on. So sometimes you need to like turn around and just like remember where you are, that you are actually accountable for these sorts of things as the director. And sort of bring yourself back. But, they're not doing it to try and kill you. They're just doing it to try and actually make you aim higher than where you are, right? If you want to be a national business, you shouldn't be a national business. You should be an international business. That's basically the mindset they'll give you.
So you said a lot about the sales. I guess you were happy with the product on the engineering side.
It was so beautiful. It was a beautiful product.
So I mean, it's like the product is properly made with all the features.
But still not good enough to open source.
No, it's horrible code. There's like only one part of it I'm actually really proud of how it got code.
Thanks.
See you soon. But no. So really with sales, the product doesn't actually matter. You can sell something that doesn't exist. Right? That happens quite a lot. Just do that. That's genuinely.
Service.com.au did that.
Yeah, Service.com. 2 years. For a long time, actually. I still don't think it exists based off what I hear. But you should be like, again, like you need to find out if people actually want to pay for this stuff. So go and actually talk to clients and just completely bullshit a demo and see if they're happy to continue talking and buy it off you. That should be like the first part that you get through. And then if they're actually willing to do it and they're willing to pay you money, and they actually give you the credit card, that's when you go and quickly hassle the thing together. That's like the way startups should operate, because their requirements aren't going to be anyone else's requirements. So there's no point building what they want for them. Just waste your time. Yes.
Thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
I'm a software testing engineer, so I wanted to know about the quality perspective. Did you invest some time into testing, or maybe like unit testing, or just manual testing?
Yeah.
A bit about that.
So for me, it was the whole idea, because our system was really complex. There was a lot that happened with a third party with Twilio. So it was really like, what can we test was the big question. We can test endpoints are responding how they're supposed to. We can test the UI is appearing how it's supposed to. But the actual behavior was just all manual testing. It had to be. And that was all me. I did all the testing myself. I think that if I'm responsible for it, then I will actually test it. And I don't want to let a client down. So before every release, I'll just go through this ridiculously long Excel sheet where I just have to test every single function in the app and make sure it all works. But third-party testing with Twilio was virtually impossible. We had to have like a demo account with them that we would use every time. It was horrible. Software testing in 23 hours was really, really hard.
How about bugs?
Sorry?
How about bugs? How many bugs was found? Or
Oh, sorry, one more time.
how
many
good
bugs?
was the software?
Bugs? Every single fucking release, man. And even bugs where like I didn't notice them would appear. Just like with weird async behavior that you would have with phone calls. So like maybe the phone call took too long to connect, and so this thing didn't fire in time. Or maybe it went through like you get a phone call and for some reason it doesn't have a caller ID, which just breaks the entire system, right? That was really just random stuff that you couldn't predict. So we have to, it was a lot. And the worst part is they would usually appear after the client started paying us money and we thought it was good to go. So that sucked. Yeah.
I'm Angie, and I'm a non-tech guy. I have 3 questions.
Yeah.
Do you have time for 3 questions?
Sorry?
Do you have time for 3 questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first one is, how do you justify paying yourself with VC funding?
That was actually by the insistence of our VC. Their first demand was that you start paying yourself, because
How
you're
do you
not.
justify?
Because they say you're not going to care if you don't get paid, right? If you're still at home wondering how the hell you're going to put dinner on the table, then you're unlikely to actually care about the product. It's going to be this sort of, hey, this thing's costing me money, I can't afford all this stuff because of it, right? Instead, it should be, hey, this thing's paying my bills. This thing's actually like putting money in my bank account. It never put money in my bank account. It was always gone.
Are you also asking like how do you justify the amount you pay yourself as well?
Yes,
or-
how do you calculate it? Because if the VC gives you 200 grand, but every month you got to report to them.
Yeah, obviously I wasn't paying myself 200 grand. I gave myself
No, out of that portion. Like,
Oh.
do you have an hourly rate? Like, how do you?
whatever you need to survive. Like they wanted it to be my ordinary salary, but I was just like, guys, that is my ordinary salary. It's not, but I tried. And in the end of the day, I ended up paying myself 50 grand because I found out that the 40,000 I first got paid at my first job was no longer legal, which is kind of funny. So I ended up giving myself whatever a junior makes these days.
All right, and the second question is, so I am in the pre-seed kind of space.
Yep.
So I'm kind of refining my pitch deck. So 3 people in town to hit VCs in Brisbane. Who are your top 3 to recommend for someone who's in my space at the moment?
Oh, sorry, can you just sorry, Calvin. My hearing is. I'm actually legitimately losing my hearing, so this is actually pretty important.
3 VCs.
In Brisbane,
Yeah.
for someone who's in the pre-seed stage that is, refining pitch deck. So I want to pitch in about 2 weeks. So 3 VCs in Brisbane local. Who do you recommend?
I only know one local, and it's 1013.
Are you thinking about going accelerator or just funding? Like you're looking to get into an accelerator program? Or?
Probably both. So I haven't quite made it to River City Lab just yet.
Okay.
I'm just putting my feelers out there because I just personally feel really overwhelmed because there's so many possibilities and people to go to. But to me, I'm just like, well, what's the right way? But there is no right way.
You should gain them off each other. You should actually be like, hey, look, well, these other guys are telling me that they're really good founders. Why are you good founders, right? And then they'll often give you the usual spiel, which is that we don't care if you fail, blah, blah, blah. You should honestly just like play them off each other, pretend that you're taking job applications from these people. And that's how it should be. That's how the relationship should be. And they'll actually respect that. They're more likely to work with you because of it.
So who is this person? Who is this VC?
Sorry?
All of them. So
Every single one. Yeah,
don't
don't just stop at Brisbane. Go Australia wide. If you got something good enough, I can put you in contact with Tola, which is a Microsoft-funded accelerator. That's right, VC in US. They're pretty big and big and cool. But they're all friendly. They won't care if you reach out to them. They're more than happy to hear where you go. Because they want to know what's going on.
They might give you some pretty blunt feedback though.
Yeah.
So just,
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
The more feedback, the better. And the other last question is for someone who is from a non-tech founder background, where would you recommend to find co-founders who is in the tech or fintech space?
Oh, this is like the golden question, right?
Next question, Patty. What are you doing there?
I was the only tech founder in that entire cohort. And I got so many job offers after they found out I was shutting it down. Right? Every single one of them tried to hire me. I'm like, man, I don't care. I'm going to work with Kelvin for a while. That sounds cool. But yeah, this is really hard. Hang out around. It's hard. If I was giving the advice, probably consider, if you're looking for like someone shit hot, you're going to have to pay them or give them something big enough that they're actually going to want to come and help. Honestly, you should consider university people coming out of university. They may lack certain technical expertise that you might want. But the fact is they're going to, they're learning stuff and they're going to learn exactly how to build your product, right?
And they might actually get to market quicker because they're more like,
yeah,
they don't over-engineer everything because they can't
offense.
over-engineer all that.
But like, yeah, they'll just like hack something together as quickly as they can. Whereas a lot of the senior engineers say, no, we have to do it the right way. It's going to take 6 months, which is like, it's not acceptable if you're starting a startup. Just get something to market, prototype, to know how much it sucks.
Or how do you attract them? Like Seed.com or what?
Now, go to
Meetups.
Meetups like this are a good spot.
Hackathons.
Yeah, hackathons, startup weekends, stuff like that.
Hackathons are great because you can actually see if people are capable of building something in a limited period of time, right? Like you've got 2 days to ship something. And so a team that actually manages to do that within 2 days, they obviously can make the decisions that are capable of getting a prototype to market effectively instead of getting lost in engineering and not shipping anything because they're looking to do something perfect.
A lot of like senior engineers will really take their time to get something just right. When it's really, they forget it should be like a first iteration MVP. Like Kelvin and I are working on something at the moment at our actual day job, and we got a prototype to market in 7 days, which I'm pretty happy with. That's pretty fast, right? But we did sacrifice quality a little bit, let's be honest.
Code's amazing. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Widget 1 and widget 2. But yeah, definitely look more junior. I recommend it.
Right attitude, probably.
As long as they're not kids. Right?
Yeah.
I have one more question. So I guess like this talk is about your experience getting fund, but I think many companies they go private because of these like hassles with investors. So I guess next time if you have another opportunity, you still want to get funding from them, or you want to say, things I will get another founder with sales experience, maybe another one with money. Do you think that would be like a better option? Or?
I really wouldn't want another founder investing too much money in my company that I started. That seems kind of an awkward relationship to have like one person in there who's the money man. A lot of people do it. I just wouldn't really want to unless they were like, hey, I'm going to give you the money and then like not touch it at all. Whatever. But I would if it made sense. I would if it made sense. I'm not against it. I'm not particularly for it. I'm working on a couple of side projects. I don't think they're going to make me any money. It's kind of just like for fun. I don't think I would get investors involved with them because they really do have certain expectations that you're going to reach certain milestones within a certain period of time. And if you don't, you're slowly going to fall out of favor with them. They'll focus on other people. Right? They invest in 10 people knowing that only one will succeed. And that really showed in the cohort I was part of. There was 20 companies and only 2 of them got like actually out of dead alive, of going to die without future funding.
People are dead instead of people alive.
That's right, yeah. And they're actually making quite a bit of money now. So that statistic for them was actually bang on.